Hi and welcome back to part 2, or is it part 1, I don't know, of the Dana build. Now basically what it is, I'll put some pictures up to show you what it is I'm actually building. But in essence it's like a mobile howitzer. Howitzer? Mobile gun, big gun. 1/6 scale. So the build's approximately 2 meters by, to the edge of the wheels, 60 centimeters to about 50 high. So it's a reasonably big truck that I'm building. And as I mentioned before, I want to do this one pretty much as close as I can get to 100% recycled and repurposed materials. Now, what I'm doing here is just playing around with steel. This gives you another idea. I've got some old table legs, which is quite good steel. It's got a bit of surface rust, and then somebody gave me all this stuff, which was really nice. So it will make, there should be enough there to make the uprights for the suspension, and that's 25mm box. And then whatever these are, I've had these for ages, just sitting around. They're a bit dented, but I can hammer them out. I'll make these the main chassis rails. Now, one motor's already made up, as you can see there. In fact, I'm going to put that one down. I'm going to pick up the light one because they're a bit heavy, these. So, as you can see, these are transaxles from mobility scooters. And what I do is I've basically modified them to make them into my differentials. And I did come up with an idea, actually. Now, this really is an experiment, and I don't know whether it's going to work. I have no idea. But basically, I've 3D printed these. Now, what these are is, it's hard to see really, they're basically, I'll bring it nice and close to the camera so that you can see, this is 3D printed, this section here, and it's slipped over a shaft that runs into about there with a keyway. So that's now locked on to the shaft. So in effect I've built a wider 35mm shaft on there, and the idea is, this is what I'm going to attempt to do. I've always struggled before to mount the wheels to these because I have to make up plates and then weld them and center them. So it just dawned on me, well, why don't I just, these come with these little plastic bearings, pop them out, and I get a 35mm hole in there. Now in theory that will go, it's going to be tight, that will basically hammer on to there. And that will give me my drive wheels then. And what I'm thinking is I'll just drill a couple of holes through the plastic and then tap into this 3D printed piece and obviously fill it with glue as well. And that should give me my wheels mounted on rigidly. The question is whether or not the wheels will slip under the torque. The reason I've gone with these over the other wheels I've used were the mountain board wheels. Now, I managed to get these. These are Barrow wheels. They were incredibly cheap. Now, they're cheap for a reason. They're all one piece, but they are quite nice tyres on them. So, and they're 220mm and 65 wide, which is exactly the size tyre I need. And obviously, being pneumatic, I can let all the air out and it looks really, really cool. So whether this system will work or not, I have no idea. So that's where I'm at really with that. And I'm just thinking at the moment about how these motors, so there's 2 of these. This is a dual drive. I'm still waiting on the second motor for this one. Dual drive system, so we'll have more than enough power with this. I've got some end plates and pieces I've got to cut, so they just cut out stuff like that. It's an old bit of section that is, I don't know where it came from another project, but there's pieces of metal in there that are useful. I'll cut them out and I'll use them to build that up. Yeah, so that's where I'm at so far. I've made up the keyways. I've got these on. These are all printed and these are on. As I said, I'm waiting for the second motor, and then what I'll have is probably 10cm risers that come off these. So this section here will be welded on, and there'll be 8 of those coming up, and that will form the, I don't know what you call them, the support pieces that hold my suspension. And I'm going to go with a combination again of leaf spring, but I'm going to use the same system I used on the fire engine and add in a coil and make that coil adjustable. So I'll have fully adjustable independent suspension as far as you can get with an axle. So I am struggling a little bit for steel at the moment. I've used so much on the other builds, but I'm going to be really, really good, and I'm not actually going to buy any for this build at all. I'm going to recycle everything, and I've got plenty of stuff, plenty of steel out the back. All I need to do is just go out and get it all cleaned off, and obviously for the body I showed you before, the big sheets of metal, that will all have to be cleaned off. So the downside to doing this, obviously if you work with a perfect bit of steel like that, which is actually really nice, brilliant to weld, really easy to work with, and you can just get on with it. When I'm working with this kind of stuff, obviously I've got to clean it off, I've got to get off all the rust and all the paint before I can do anything with it at all. But that's part and parcel of working with recycling and repurposing materials. Hi, welcome to Podpad Studios and the third instalment of the Dana build. Now, I'm going to call it Project Dana right now. I'm sure I'll come up with a really clever name or something like that. But so I talked about the metal before, and I would say now that I'm probably at about 90% in terms of, no, actually, right now it'll probably be 100% recycling on the metal. So the metal that's going to be used on it is completely recycled metal. There's quite a lot of preparation to do, and I'll do another video later on showing how I prepare the metal, because obviously there's an awful lot of taking paint off and stuff like that. This is just some of the electronics that's going to go in and some of the hardware. Now, some bits I've scrounged off for the project. So I've got some little old leaf springs I've made here for another project. I've got loads of more of these to make. So, you know, some of these are like die springs, but they're really good. And I'm going to use these as, the way I work it is I actually put them underneath the leaf, and I can make them adjustable, so that'll have those on. There's some other bits repurposed. Some of these end pieces I've bought, but I've got loads left over from another project, and as you can see, all of these. But then obviously there are things that do need to get bought, so things like nuts, bolts. Obviously they're the main bolts that are going to be used to go through to create the wheel bearings, the axles, sorry, for the steering. So that's kind of just hardware. In terms of electronics, I'm actually going to go with, I've got one of these left over from another project. I'm not going to go with the Chinese single speed controllers. I've got one of these, so I'm going to use it. That's the dual Sabretooth. So that's going to go into this one. What else? Obviously the receiver is, I've gone again with this one with a TDR18 because I'm going to need the channels on that. So obviously that's really important to have the channels. I think 18 channels should be more than enough. Smoke machine, again, a little control board. It's all kind of wired up, ready to go. UBEC, again, these are, I haven't actually bought any of these. They're off previous projects. There's a bit of a beefy one. That one came off the Dalek, because I've redesigned the Dalek mechanism now and got rid of most of the servos. So this is a 50 amp UBEC, which is enormous. It's probably a little bit overkill. It might go on this one, it might not, it depends. The reason I say it might not go on is these are the servos that I use. Now, if you haven't seen the servos I've used before, I don't use these. So this is the more traditional servo, which are great, and I think these are 25 kilo servos. They're great, but they're simply not good enough for what I need. So I use these, and you can see the difference. So the motors on these are enormous. This particular one is a 360 kilogram servo, and then obviously there's the servo horn that will fit onto that. I'll use one of these for the steering. I've used these in everything. I've used these in the fire engine, I've used these in the tank transporter, the tank, everything. They're just amazing bits of kit. Really good value as well. I'll also use one of these for the turret. So I've got a second one of those there. That will be used for the turret, because the turret doesn't need to go through 360 degrees. It only needs to move 60 degrees. So one of these will control the turret and one will control the steering. What else? Oh yeah, sound. I'm going with this, and I've used these before on the fire engine and on the tank transporter. They're great. Now, I don't use them just like this. I do some a significant modification to these, which I will put out on a video on its own a bit later on. I'll show you what I actually do. So you can get an awful lot more volume from these. But these are awesome little bits of kit. They're actually they're loud enough on their own, but for what I want louder, and I want more bass. So it's these modified, and that's for my sound system. And that is some of the electronics that's going to go into the new build. As I said, we're nowhere near this going in yet. I'm going to start on the chassis very, very soon, and then that'll be another video where you can see how I build the suspension and the supports for the wheels and the chassis.